Hi, this is Misha. In today's video is a companion we did to the Spanish Mauser video, and this looks at Spanish military service type sidearms. Before we get into it, you really have to talk about the Ruby. And this is a gun I've gotten a lot of mileage out of showing in videos because it's so iconic, ubiquitous, even infamous. Not a whole lot of these actually went to the Spanish military. They never officially adopted it. This one here, like a lot, was used by France in World War I. And it's in our French video for information on that side. But I just wanted to show it. Basically, these guns were made in the Eibar region of Spain and were, to greater or lesser extent, copies and kind of amalgamations of both the Colt in 1903 and the FN 1903, which, while being two different guns, were both designed by John Browning. So basically this is a simplified version of a Browning pistol. It doesn't have the grip safety. It doesn't have a lot of the refinement. This is a very handmade, hand-fitted gun. It's chambered for 7.65 millimeter. 32. It uses a 9-round magazine, at least standard, which is pretty high capacity for the day. It's just a simple little blowback gun. The safety is here. It's just a little slide lock type safety. That's about it. Very simple sights that are fixed. As I said, this one was in French military service. These really started in 1914 when the company, which would eventually become Llama, started off making these. At that time, before a lot of companies were making clones and copies in Spain in the early 20th century of other guns, because it's my notes, as I wrote to myself, essentially Spanish copyright law sucked. The details are all over the internet, but the long and the short of it is that the way the Spanish law and government treated copyrights, if the gun wasn't made in Spain within 3 years of the patent being filed and accepted and granted, then Spanish companies were free to basically rip it off, and that's what happened here. Well, several different companies tried several different things. Well, finally, 1914, the Ruby comes out, and it's a success. World War I happens. France doesn't have enough guns. They start off by ordering, a few thousand a month, then they want up to 20,000, then 30, then 50. So basically manufacturing grew from one company to 5, up to a total of 45 companies making these, with several even other subcontractors making components. So by 1916, 1917, it was a whole cluster, and different parts were not interchangeable from company to company, not even magazines. Quality went all over the board. I consider this one to be a pretty high quality gun as far as function. It moves smoothly, but even it has a lot of tool marks, hand fitting, and you could tell it was just kind of put together in a hurry. These guns would be produced up through the 1920s. In total, about 1 million were made. Most did go to the French military, but others were sold to the Italian military and a few to the Portuguese. And still others were sold on the commercial market to the U.S. in the 1920s, and were very commonly found guns in the hands of, or well, more usually the boots of bootleggers at the time. So it was a small, inexpensive, very durable, just not much to go wrong with it. And really for the 1920s, it was probably one of the better automatic handguns available for not a lot of money. But yeah, since we're doing Spanish guns, I just kind of wanted to show the Ruby because it is probably one of the most famous Spanish guns, even if very few of these were actually used by the Spanish military. Now what we have next is a Spanish Astra Model 1921, also known as the Model 400. Now this was the official standard issue sidearm in Spain from 1921 until 1946. So to backtrack on this one a little bit, we need to go back to 1903. At that time, Spain decided it wanted to adopt the Bergman Model 1903 pistol. The problem was there wasn't really a factory to produce these, so this was held off until 1908 when Bayard in Belgium was found as basically a manufacturer to do these. So now we're already moving up to the Model 1908 Bergman Bayard with some updates and improvements to the design. Even then it took time to get production up and going, so it wasn't until 1910 that Spain took delivery of the 3,000 pistols it had originally ordered 7 years earlier. Now, these were quickly, the Bergman Bayards were quickly discovered to not be acceptable for military service for various reasons. The reason I do bring it up, though, is because it's what introduced the 9x23 Bergman cartridge to the Spanish military and police, and this would be a highly influential cartridge for the next 50, 60, even 70 years. So, yeah, 1911, they decide the Bergman Bayard is not what they want, so they have another round of trials in 1912. This leads to them adopting the Model 1913 Campo Gyro or Campo Gyro pistol, which was a domestically made Spanish gun. It was chambered for the 9x23 Bergman cartridge, now renamed 9mm Largo. And it's also notable that while the Bergman pistol was a locked breech, the Campo Gyro was basically a blowback gun. It had a really stout spring. It was also a very heavy pistol. It had a 6.5-inch barrel, but it was reasonably dependable, reasonably well made, but also a little hard to field strip, disassemble, so on and so forth. They went through a few iterations. There was the Model 1913/1916 produced during World War I. But already by 1919, Spain was yet again looking for another military service sidearm. The Campo Gyro just wasn't really, for various reasons, working out for them either. They had produced about 15,000, including both models. So, we're already nearly 2 decades into the whole self-loading pistol craze, and Spain has managed to obtain 18,000 different pistols of several different models total. So, 1919, the War Ministry under King Alfonso says we want to try to go to a different gun. They have trials, 1921. This gun here wins the trials. This is the Astra Model 1921 Astra 400. It is heavily influenced by the Campo Gyro. If anything, it's really just a product improved and simplified version. It too is a straight blowback gun. It too fires the 9mm Largo pistol. And it too is quite big and heavy, although quite a bit lighter and still quite a little bit shorter than the Campo. It has a barrel that's 5.9 inches, so just under 6 inches long. So we are about an inch shorter, and it is considerably lighter, and it is definitely easier to take apart. And that's what we have here today. This, as I said, was adopted, and it went into production and service in Spain. It has a typical 8-round detachable box mag with a heel release. Let me leave this out for a sec so I can rack the weapon. It is very stout. Now once it's cocked, it's a little easier. It's actually quite easy once you get the hammer back. And it has a magazine disconnect safety. So I need to put the mag back in to discharge it. The trigger is fine. It's the military trigger. It's a single action only gun. Pull it back here. It will lock open on an empty mag, but there's no release. You can see there's just, the safety here, much like on the Ruby style safety. We're just held back. These notches in the barrel are part of the takedown procedure, which is actually very easy to do. You have to deal with a very strong spring, so I don't want to really do it on camera, sorry. Just drop your mag a little bit to release. At least, even though it is a stout pull, not only are these two sections here ribbed, they actually flare out towards the back, which does give you a very easy, good, positive grip. So there's at least that. It is hammer fired, although it's a concealed hammer, kind of a la the early Browning designs. Again, kind of like the Ruby too. We do have a grip safety. very large and easy to use. We have a standard safety here, which blocks the trigger. As you saw, the release is down here. Wood grips. And that's really about it. It's a very simple, pretty large frame gun. As I said, these were chambered for 9mm Largo. They will shoot other 9mm rounds, such as 9mm 9x23 Steyr. They will shoot 9mm Parabellum as well. However, it's not a good idea. You can read all about that. Really, the right ammo and the right gun. They would produce about 106,000 of these until the end of production. They would be used on both sides of the Spanish Civil War and well after. And even though they were officially replaced in 1946, many would stay in service through the mid-50s. Most would be sold off as surplus after 1956, though. Just a pretty simple, dependable gun. Because it is a direct blowback, there have been reports of some frames cracking and having stress. But basically when you use the right ammo in these, they're perfectly dependable. But they are unique for their operating system. You know, most every other 9mm gun you find is a lot to breech. At least outside of like 9mm Makarov, of course. And 380, which is 9mm Kurz. Before someone said something in the comments. Not that YouTube ever has comments like that, right? But it's a neat gun. I think it's interesting. It feels good. It was kind of nicknamed the pipe wrench by some too. I think you can probably figure out why. It's not as awkward to handle as it looks. It's actually reasonably comfortable. During World War II, Spain would make a version for Nazi Germany of the Astra, chambered specifically for 9mm Luger Parabellum, and it was known as the Model 1943 or the Astra 600. It is the same gun as the 400, except scaled down a little bit. This has about a 5.3 inch barrel, so about a half an inch shorter. It's a little bit lighter, a little bit smaller dimensions all around, but mechanically it is the exact same gun, right down to being straight blowback. The only difference, the mag release, instead of being in the back here, is now on the side. You just pinch it, and it has a little protrusion on the other side of the mag to grab with. But other than that, same gun. Interestingly, they would start to produce these, and about 10,500 would make it to Nazi Germany before France was invaded and the supply line between Spain and Germany was effectively cut off. They did try sending a few of these by ship, but they were intercepted. So just over 10,000 actually made it there. So that left Spain with this model here following World War II. Now, production numbers are a little sketchy. I've seen between 50,000 and 60,000. It's a reasonably large number. So remove 10,000 from that. They had about 40 to 50,000 left. Now, some of these would be sold on the commercial market. However, fun story. In the late 1940s, early 1950s, the West German police were looking for a new service sidearm. This suited them well. Again, it was originally made for the Germans. It shoots their cartridge. Simple, dependable gun, not as big and heavy as the 400. And so German police thought they would go with the Astra Model 600. And since the Germans had already bought and purchased these during World War II, it seemed like a simple proposition to get them from Spain. However, Astra, in kind of a smart business practice, said, wait a second, these were bought by someone else. These were bought by the Third Reich regime, not the new West German government. So you didn't buy these. A different government that no longer exists bought these. They actually got West Germany to pay for these guns twice. Or I should say, West Germany once, Nazi Germany once. So Germany paid for these guns effectively twice. Kind of a smart business practice. Normally it might seem a little scummy, but when you're considering that one of the ripped-off parties was the Nazis, And not really any sympathy there, especially after what the Nazis did to the Simson and Seoul factory and Krieghoff and all that. I think it was a little bit of just desserts. Yeah, these would go into West German police service throughout the 50s and 60s before being surplused out. Yeah, the Astra Model 600 in 9x19 Luger. Moving on, we have one that is quite famous in the U.S. today. This is the Star Model B Super. Now the Model B is chambered for 9x19, Parabellum Luger. The Model A is chambered for 9mm Largo, 9x23 9mm Bergman. That is the only difference. In fact, these guns weren't even marked, so the only difference was the barrel, the chamber. The mags were actually all the same even. This is a little stiff. These mags will all work with the 9x23. So essentially the A model was for Spanish use and the B model was for export use. Beginning around 1922, the Star Company started to make headway with the Spanish government. The Guardia Civil adopted an early Star pistol, an early version of the Model A. And it was loosely based on the 1911. So kind of moving, it's kind of the equivalent if the Ruby is like the 1903, this is the equivalent to being the Ruby but for the 1911. It uses a locked breech design with the 1911 style barrel. We have a 1911 style slide release, 1911 style thumb safety, 1911 style beaver tail, now they would update this in 1924, they would again update it in 1931, that's where we get more interesting. In 1931, the Star Company would modify their Model A pistol, and at that time the Model B was also in production as well, to look more like a 1911. They would, or excuse me, more like a 1911 A1. They would go to this arched and checkered back strap. They would improve the sights, making them bigger and easier to use. And just other little cosmetic changes. Now, something they did delete was the grip safety. There's no grip safety like on a 1911 would have. And the trigger, instead of being a straight, just pull it back and towards you trigger, is actually a pivoting trigger held into the frame with the roll pin, so it pivots on a roll pin. So that was 1931 when the Model A and B, really I think they're called the third pattern, came out. 1940, Star releases its first model called the Model 1940, specifically targeting military users. And in 1946, the Star Model A Super was officially adopted in the Spanish military as the replacement for the Astra Model 1921 Astra 400. The Super is very similar to the earlier versions, with a few notable changes. They have simplified and updated the barrel camming system. They've gone to a self-contained mainspring. And probably most interestingly, they put an easy takedown lever here, so you don't have to use a 1911 style. We need to remove the mag to use it. Yeah, get out of my way. Basically, you just, once your mag's out, flick that forward, and your slide comes right off, and that's it. So it is a very easy to use takedown system, and with the mag in, it can't come down, so it's secure. Now this version would also have a magazine disconnect safety. This one has a really nice trigger too. And I like that it has kind of the earlier 1911 style large spur checkered hammer. That's nice. It's easy to grab and just really useful. But yeah, the Spanish military would adopt the Model A Super in 1946 in 9mm Largo, and the Model B Super would be in production at the same time for a 9x19 Parabellum. And these would remain in standard service for a very long time throughout really the Cold War era, and they would remain in production until 1983. They're basically a 1911 but in 9mm with a few simplifications and also a few product improvements. They're well made, reliable. It's also worth noting that in 1942, 1943, Spain would make, or I should say Star would make some of these for the Nazi Germans called the Model P08, Model B P08. And many would be captured by the Russians. And after the war, they would receive the typical Russian refurbishment with the dip bluing and the lacquered grips and all that. So you'll see some Russian captured Model Bs out there. And you'll see a lot of Model B Supers like this one that were more recent police trade-ins. That's what this is. These would often come with 2 mags and all that. So yeah, these are out there, and up until recently they were easy to find, inexpensive, about $250, $300 for a nice condition 9mm 1911 shooter. To me it has a very comfortable grip. Very nice gun for what it is. And standard issue in Spain for a long time. So we've done the pistols, and I've had this carbine sitting here this whole time as well. I teased you with it in the Mauser's video. This is a destroyer. Carbine. And it's basically a little Mauser. Work began on these in the early 1920s. The early guns are kind of obscure. No one knows a whole lot about them. They went through several different iterations and patterns. But in 1935 or thereafter, Herradura in Spain, or Duria in Spain, began mass producing these and would make them throughout the 1960s. Some were sold to the civilian market. Many others were sold to private security, prison guards, but probably the most famous user was the Guardia Civil and the institution under Franco known as the Greys. Now, before this came out, the Guardia Civil was using a version of the Winchester 1892 Carbine in 4440, and it was called the El Tigre, the Tiger. But by the 1920s and 30s, it was getting outdated, old, and not especially efficient. So they were looking for a new weapon to replace it. And the destroyer was kind of the ticket. It fit in well with everything else in use in Spain at the time. Starting at the muzzle, we have a 19-inch barrel, so good carbine length. No upper handguard. Full-length lower stock. Typical adjustable rear sight. We have side sling mounts, front and rear, with rotating swivels. Now the receiver is inspired by the 1893 Mauser, but it's actually simplified and cheapened up because we're only firing the 9x23 Bergman, or 9mm Largo cartridge, and that's why I saved this gun for the pistols video. So we're firing a small pistol caliber round out of a turn bolt locked breech gun. Nice triggers on these. Also, we feed from 6 or 10 round magazines, which were borrowed from the 1908 Bergman Bayard gun. It's kind of nice. That way, by the 1920s, the Bergmans that were out in Spain were mostly used by police, if anyone. So it was kind of nice that they could use the same ammo and the same mags in their little carbine. The bolt is kind of cool. Like I said, it is a little 1893 style bolt. And to take it out, it's super simple. Just you need to line it up here. I don't have a camera here. I can use both hands, get these other pistols out of the way. But it's just it's a really slick little design. You just line it up with a notch here, twist, and it comes out. It has a little rotating extractor. It's kind of cool. We have 2 locking lugs here. It's worth noting that the really early production destroyer carbines only relied on the bolt root to lock, but they discovered that was not a good idea. It has a Mauser style safety. The bolt comes apart just like a Mauser would. It really is just a small Mauser. Getting it back in is only slightly more difficult. You just need to line things up. I can do it myself. There we go. That's it for disassembly. Got the striker sticking out the back. Got the Mauser safety, that's the takedown position. Just like on a regular Mauser, you can rack the action, but dead trigger over here for full safe. Guess you can rack it on that too. Never really noticed, but never really thought about it. But yeah. Just a neat, handy little gun. It's kind of long, but it's very thin, really lightweight. And this is, even though it's a bolt action, kind of a forerunner of a lot of the pistol caliber carbines that are available today. I would say that the Beretta CX4 comes to mind, but there's been a lot of guns similar to this over time. And even when they started to make this in the early 20s, the whole concept of a submachine gun was very new. But yeah. The Guardia Civil and the Grays would use this throughout the 1940s and 50s. It would stay in production until the 60s. I'm not sure when they went out of production. Some people say 61, some people say 71. I don't suppose it really matters. It seems for military use and police use, they quit buying them before that either way. It's also worth noting that the late production versions of this were also chambered for 9x19 Parabellum, which by that point I'm sure was for export sales, because by that point Interarms had been bringing guns out of Spain into the U.S. for several years, and it was a pretty lucrative market, so why not produce some in a more common caliber. But that said, 9mm Bergman, as this is marked, or 9mm Largo, is still available today, so it's quite fun. The cartridge gets a little bit better velocity out of the long barrel, but really the benefit is having a buttstock and having a long sight radius. So your person can be more accurate with these as opposed to a pistol. I mean, and there's no recoil. And since we actually have a true locked breech action, you're safe. Kind of the same warning as with the Astra 400. These will chamber and fire a 9mm Luger Parabellum just fine, but it's not the smartest thing to do, so probably just look for the right ammo. Or if you really want one, you can find the 9mm Luger versions on Gunbroker, although they tend to go for about double what the 9mm Largo versions do. But yeah, just a neat little Spanish gun, I thought. If you have any questions or comments, we really welcome them below. If you like the video, please click like. If you haven't subscribed, we would really appreciate it. We appreciate each and every one of our subscribers. We're trying to grow the channel and just bring interesting content to you. Hope we're at least halfway succeeding. This is Misha, and please tune in again next time, and we'll catch you soon.